So often when surveyors are completing surveys, coordinates, particularly ordnance survey coordinates, might not be immediately available to them. And the survey will therefore, first of all, be conducted at an entirely local site. And as coordinates are available for some of the stations, then the survey can be recomputed using those stations. Now, often the easiest way, which is what we've done, or what the surveyor did in this case, is to actually survey the stations from the setup, and ideally from an individual setup, to survey the stations with the total station for which coordinates will be later available. So in this survey, the surveyor has measured 2 nails. Point number 1, which you can see available you can see here, and point number 42, which if I just highlight the actual vector, see if I can find it, there it is. They were surveyed from the initial setup, so from a single setup. They were surveyed and coordinates were later given for those 2 points. Now what we can do now is we can actually change this setup whereby a value of 1,000 and 1,000 would just keyed in for the first station. We can change it from a standard station setup on a known point with an azimuth back bearing to a resection. So the first thing we're going to do is actually add the coordinates that we have for points number 1 and 42. The easiest way to do that is go into the Project Explorer, which you can just go from Home, Project Explorer. We right click on point number 1 and we choose Add Coordinate. Now to make this easier, I'm just going to dock the stations left and right, because the values I have here are just in a text document. So I'm going to choose Add Coordinate. I've managed to shrink this right off into the corner here. So I'm just going to say this is point number 1. And I'm just copying and pasting the coordinates I have for that into here. And I've got 3D coordinates. And then these are control quality coordinates. So we can just mark them as control quality coordinates. And we hit OK. And we can see that point number 1's got an observation going to it, but it's also got a coordinate of its own. And we're just going to do the same for point number 42. Click it, right click, choose Add Coordinate. And this time I am just going to change this value as so. And again, it's got a height, so it's a 3D coordinate. And once again, that should be a control quality coordinate. And we can click OK. So you can see that these, because we've got observations to point number 1 and there's a new value for point number 1, then it's shooting way up into the big coordinate there. The next things we need to do is actually change the setup type. And the easiest way to change the setup type is in the Project Explorer, actually go all the way down to our imported files. And we can see that we've got an imported file. And this first station setup. And here we're basically seeing the chronological order of what's been done. So the first thing that's been done is we've set up on this point, and then there's been a keyed in coordinate and there's an azimuth. And what we can do is we can actually say that there's a keyed in coordinate, there's an azimuth, and that's going to this point called north. And then what we can do is we can actually change, first of all, the observations to point number 1. And I could have changed this further up in the Project Explorer, this part, but point number 1 I want to make as a backsite, and point number 42 I want to now make as a backsite, because they're going to be the backsites that define the resection. This observation to north, I can say that that's no longer a backsite, and this azimuth to north is no longer required, because that was just a temporary thing. And we actually have a coordinate here for the resection that was typed in, and we can actually, it's probably better to delete it up in the first part of the Project Explorer. So this is 957 and we can see it here, and we can just delete that. So the coordinate that was calculated from the coordinate that was keyed in for the initial station setup has been deleted. The backsites are now for 1 and 42, and the final thing that we need to do is change this to a standard resection. And when we hit the red dot to recompute the project, what we should hopefully see, and this is just a temporary point, this is just a point that wasn't used, if I double click, is that we've now got the whole survey recomputed onto the Ordnance Survey grid. Because that first station setup was established to local site, when we cut and everything was hanging off that first setup, so there's common point between the first setup and the second setup, then when we change the setup to the resection and recalculate that station setup, then the second station setup will also be recalculated. Now, it's very important when we do this, because we've changed it to a standard resection, is actually look at the quality of the standard resection. And we can do that if we just hit F4 again. We can see the quality of the resection. So we can see that standard resection, we've got a standard error of 12 seconds in the orientation, standard error in the station establishment to 5 millimeters in easting, 5 millimeters in northing, and 2 millimeters in elevation. And we can see the individual resection, the residuals for both horizontally and vertical to the various backsites. So that's how we recalculate a station establishment from local site to Ordnance Survey coordinates.